Tommy Morrison trying to get back on the winning track. And coming up next, Tim Puller, the heavyweight from Israel, an outstanding prospect. His record 12-2. He'll meet Mike Dixon when we come back. In tonight's co-feature, heavyweights Tim Puller and Mike Dixon square off, both needing a victory to move on to bigger and better things. Puller comes off his most impressive pro win in December when he stopped favorite Sherman Griffin. Despite a broken ankle, Puller knocked Griffin down 3 times and won for the 12th time in 14 decisions. His opponent, Mike Dixon, is a 500 fighter, but one of his 15 pro wins was a shocker over world title-bound Alex Garcia. The question for Dixon is, was the Garcia fight a fluke or an indication of Dixon's potential? Mike Dixon, and 14 of his 15 wins have been by knockout. He has won a decision only once in his career. Lost 3 of his last 4 fights, including his last bout, 10-round decision to Alex Garcia here in Oklahoma. Meanwhile, there's Tim Puller, Israeli-born, now lives in Ruidoso, New Mexico, in the southern New Mexico mountains, about an hour and a half outside of El Paso. And there you see the win over Griffin. And now let's take a look at the tail of the tape. Dixon, the older of the 2 men. Puller came in at 239, Dixon 225. Puller with a 5-inch height advantage, and thus a rather significant reach advantage of 6.5 inches. And the Oklahoma rules, no standing 8 count. The 3 knockdown rule is in effect. You can be saved by the bell in the last round only. And of course, 10-point must system. 3 judges will score at ringside. And now let's go back once again to our ring announcer, Mark Biro.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's bouts are under the auspices of the Oklahoma Professional Boxing Board Boxing Administrator Jim Hall. Holden Productions and Budweiser, proud to be your bud, presents 10 rounds heavyweights. Your referee for this event from Kansas City, Missouri, Kevin Champion. Introducing now the principals, beginning first in the red corner to my right, wearing the black trunks with white sash trim. He weighs 225 pounds. His professional record is 15 wins, 15 defeats. He has 14 knockouts. He hails from Atlanta, Georgia, Iron Mike Dixon. His opponent in the blue corner, wearing the black trunks with green accessories. He weighs 239 pounds. His professional record, 12 wins, 2 defeats. He has 7 knockouts. He now makes his home in Ruidoso, Mexico, the Hebrew Hammer, Tim Puller. 10 rounds, heavyweights.
All right, you guys know the rules. I expect a good, clean fight. I want you to keep your punches up and obey my commands at all times. Any questions? Good luck to both of you. Go back to your corners.
There's Tim Puller and now Mike Dixon. And Dixon has really become, Sean, a one-man proving ground for up-and-coming heavyweights. He has fought the likes of WBC champion Oliver McCall, Lennox Lewis, Ray Mercer, Buster Mathis, Herbie Hyde, lost all of those bouts. And has fought Alex Garcia twice. Actually, against Garcia, he had the biggest win of his career back in June of '93. Garcia had signed to fight Riddick Bowe, and Mike Dixon knocked him out in the 2nd round.
Yeah, definitely a trial horse, Mike Dixon. He's a dangerous fighter, too, because you have to be extremely careful early. He hits extremely hard, but if you can wear him down those rounds and take him to the later rounds, he usually comes in out of shape. Although tonight he says he is in great shape. Taking many fights on short notice in the other man's hometown. He is an opponent.
Had success early in his career, won his first 5 fights all by knockout, and ran his record to 10-1, but then he hit a wall and lost 5 straight, including one to former WBC champion Lennox Lewis.
Yeah, the 10-1 that you're talking about, all 10 of those wins by knockout.
Takes an amazing amount of punishment in his bouts. And at times, he doesn't really even seem to be trying. He takes a lot of shots, fights flat-footed, doesn't really seem to move well, and something of an enigma to his trainers because they'll say he'll work hard in the gym, and then he comes out to fight, and he doesn't seem to have the same effort. That left hand lands from Puller.
In tonight's fight, he said, I'm going to try to stay on top of him, and he's done that the early part of this round. It's a dangerous thing to do, especially when you get out in the end of somebody like Tim Puller. He doesn't want for Puller to use his reach advantage. 6.5 inches for Tim Puller. Mike Dixon, 75.5. Puller, 82 inches. Right hand, but Mike Dixon rolls with a punch. Dixon pulls away just enough to take the power out of the punch. Tim Puller says that he is a student of the game. He said the hardest part of boxing is learning to relax inside the ropes. He's been criticized in the past for his lack of stamina, but he says tonight in this fight, I'm going to learn something from mighty Mike Dixon.
Well, we mentioned that Puller is living now in Ruidoso, New Mexico, and that is an altitude of almost 10,000 feet. So when you train under those conditions, that can't help but make you get into better shape.
Exactly. The air there is thinner than it is in our altitude here. When you come down to this altitude, you are in better condition. Breathe the air easier. Good combination from Tim Puller.
And Dixon content to lean against the ropes, trying to fight his way out now.
Get him up! Get him up!
Yeah, Dixon wants to use his power to pull off a surprise.
Winding down round one.
Tim Puller calls this his best punch, the left uppercut. One coming in, a couple from Mike Dixon. Tim Puller uses his too. He says that is his favorite punch. He is naturally left-handed. And he boxes from a right-handed stance. Mike Dixon, his power is in that left hand. We saw that when he fought Alex Garcia.
Well, we mentioned Tim Puller coming off the best showing of his career. That was in December against Sherman Griffin, and Griffin was a big puncher who was 16-4 coming in. He knocked Griffin down 3 times, once in the 3rd, twice in the 5th, before finally stopping him in the 8th. And now it's Puller who seems content to lean back on the ropes and let Mike Dixon throw.
Tim Puller is in trouble. Mike Dixon's unloading, but a lot of these shots are missing the mark. Mike Dixon, a fighter who a lot of times punches himself out.
The left lands from Tim Puller, and I think Puller may have been doing a little bit of the rope-a-dope, letting Dixon land the shots outside and blocking them. Big left from Tim Puller. Sean mentioned that Puller is a student of the game. He's been reading books on boxing, watching tapes, trying to learn as much as he can about the sport. Also has gone back to school through an extension program at Eastern New Mexico University. And now they've reversed positions, and it's Puller who is hammering and landing more effectively.
Yeah, going to school now is Tim Puller. You know, he weathered the storm when Mike Dixon was pounding, but now he's pounding back, and now the tide has turned. Using his muscle also, Tim Puller is pushing. Pushing Dixon back to the ropes and landing. Dixon uses those ropes. This is how Mike Dixon rests. He leans up against those ropes. You don't even have to stand up. You just lean there and you roll with the punches, and then you put a little bitty shots back in there. Mike Dixon has been criticized for being a lazy fighter. Sometimes won't even punch. Doesn't even try to avoid punches at times. Just takes the shot and rolls with it. And it is an easier way to fight.
The book on Puller was that he liked to use the jab to set up his combinations, but really tonight against Dixon thus far, he's basically been leaning in and throwing his combinations straight at Dixon, who's often leaning in opposite him. And we'll pause now for a word from your local cable.
Well, Mike Dixon put the pressure on and threw the punches, but it were the heavier shots from Tim Puller that did most of the damage in that second round. Puller, with that left hook, was able to back Dixon to the ropes and keep him there for the last half of the round.
And in his corner between rounds, Puller was told just relax. Dixon's legs are starting to go, and it will happen, he was told.
Yeah, one of the things that he has consciously been trying to do, relax. And it's so hard to do that when you realize that a man's trying to knock your head off. Just relax. You don't want to relax too much. Your opponent wants you to relax on the canvas.
You know, on paper, this seems to be exactly the kind of fight that Puller needs at this stage of his career, and the feeling is that if Puller is for real, then he should be able to put away Mike Dixon.
Well, you know, he wants this fight for experience. There's no threat with a fighter like Mike Dixon except those first few rounds when Dixon could catch you. But he wants this fight for credibility. He wants to show people that he can go in there with a veteran, somebody that's been in there with a lot of fighters. First of all, what you want to do in your career is fight somebody who's faced a lot of these fighters, and then fight the fighters that he's faced.
And don't forget, coming up, Tommy Morrison and Ken Merritt. That's our main event here on USA's Tuesday Night Fights. Tim Puller, only 25 years old, Sean, not as active as you'd think a young fighter would be. He fought only once in '93 and only twice last year. In fact, he didn't have a fight for the 12 months between September of '93, when he lost an 8-round decision to William Norris, in September of last year, when he knocked out Desmond Brown.
Yeah, well, this is a man in Tim Puller who came into boxing with no amateur experience. He loves the sport of boxing. As you mentioned earlier, lands his best right hand, and in learning the game, he is on the job training in his fights. But he goes in and he spars and he tries to learn as much as he can about sparring, but it's different inside the ropes, as he's finding out now. Puller, mouth open, better shut that jaw down.
Since he took on Ron Weathers as his manager, he moved from Las Vegas to Ruidoso, New Mexico, and he's won his last 2 fights as Tim Puller. Meanwhile, Mike Dixon, as we've mentioned a couple of times, showed that spark against Alex Garcia, but that thus far has been the highlight of his career as we wind down round number 3. Oklahoma City, Bill McAtee along with Sean O'Grady, USA's Tuesday Night Fights. Good to have you with us. We're scheduled for 10. Tim Puller, the record of 12-2 from Israel against Mike Dixon. 500 fighter at 15-15 for 14 knockouts.
Yeah, between rounds, they were telling Mike Dixon, Abdullah Muhammad saying to him, Puller is ready to quit. Get on him and start hitting the body. They want Mike Dixon to put pressure on and go downstairs to the body of Tim Puller. You know, Tim Puller is with his height and his size, his reach, he could be a cutie. He could stand out in the end of that jab, use it, box from the outside, but he enjoys boxing. He loves the sport so much that he likes to get in there and fight.
Good combination from Tim Puller. Also overheard in Dixon's corner them asking for more movement, and I get the sense that they've asked that many times before in his fights, and he has not complied.
Yeah, well, by the time you have 30 fights, as Mike Dixon has, he sometimes quit listening to instructions. It's hard to get your fighter to listen, to relax and listen to what that corner's saying, and go out and do it. Sometimes you form your own opinion about how a certain technique will work.
Good right hand from Dixon.
Yeah, and Dixon laying up against the ropes. This is a terrible impression on the judges. It gives them the impression that you're hurt, that you don't want to fight. Puller, it gives him a better impression because he's there, he's trying to throw punches, trying to score. In the corner, I was talking about him a little bit earlier, Abdullah Muhammad, very animated. Trying to tell his fight.